We name and shame people. Governments. Be careful what I'm saying today, some of you guys. We name and shame companies. We confront them. We ask them, what are you doing in Western Sahara? Have you sought the consent? Have you obtained the consent? There are ties of commercial activities, commercial ties between most countries in the world and Western Sahara. This means that for many of you, that it would be possible to either use this as an opportunity to defend the Sahrawi cause by researching your trade with Morocco and Western Sahara. There's also almost an obligation to report back and issue advice to your companies. You are at risk, not only of violating norms, but also there are very motivated lawyers, as you hear, to follow legal processes. Our association, we have volunteers in some 50 countries. We share information between us of what we uncover. Now we contact companies. I'm going to go through the different industries. You will hear names of governments and of companies from different states. Some of them of you here today. I could even denounce some governments here today, but I prefer not to do it at this moment, but can do it afterwards. We have no shame, by the way. This is the world's longest conveyor belt, transporting the phosphate rock, small pieces of rock from the inland mine out to the port. Morocco produces most of its phosphates in Morocco proper. Our organization, we have no embargo policy on Morocco. We find Morocco to be a legit country to trade with, but do not trade with goods from Western Sahara when you deal with Morocco. A part of maybe about 10% of the phosphate rock produced by Morocco is produced in the territory it occupies, in this very particular mine. They have just, 1 or 2 years ago, they have depleted the top layer of the most valuable and the most accessible phosphate rock. So it means the Sahrawi people, after 40 years of illegal plunder, they have now lost the most valuable part of their most valuable asset that they could have built a state upon. But there's still phosphate left. The production level is about, every year, about 2 million tons. We know more or less where every kilo ends up. We have more or less total control over the entire trade. Every day we follow the vessels, both through websites, through harbor activity, through import harbor activities, through people working on different harbors internationally. We know where all the vessels go to. On this list here, this is a random list from last year. Vessel going to Canada, Lithuania, United States, Venezuela, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. And in the right column, that's the size of the vessels. It's deadweight tons of the vessels. So we know where all the phosphate ends up. You will find that on our website, reports of the annual trade. We call the report P for plunder. P, the phosphorus, the element of phosphorus is necessary for agricultural production. So it's fertilizers. So the importing harbors, we have about 8 to 10 different countries. There's very little variation from one year to the other. Canada, United States, New Zealand, India are the main import harbors. European Union has more or less stopped. There's a vessel coming to Romania today. That's the first imports to Romania, by the way. Gilles, you should follow this one. The first imports to the European Union after the judgment was today in Romania. We are starting also to trace the ownership of the vessels. Which are the operators, owners, group owners of the vessels? We're following the same methodology that was used in the anti-apartheid research, by the way. Tracing the shipments going in and out of South African ports. We're using, actually, many of our activists are old anti-apartheid activists, and we apply the very same methods that we used for the crude oil imports to South Africa, naming and shaming those importers. This is the vessel that was detained, which was so and elaborately explained. 55,000 tons of phosphates aboard one vessel stopped in Port Elizabeth on the 1st of May. Just to explain the risk, this particularly for, if I may, again, I'm an NGO, so I'm allowed to do this. So it's particularly Switzerland and United States here today. The legal risks, here you have one operator. There's one ship operator just 1 kilometer down the street to Switzerland here. Down in Geneva, it's mentioned in our report, there's one operator from Denmark, from Germany. You know the Dr. Oetker pizzas? So the Dr. Oetker conglomerate is the operator of this vessel. They lose $10,300 every day of the detention of the vessel. Now that's the kind of risk. Now this vessel has been detained since the 1st of May, so we're talking millions of dollars that this one company from Germany is losing by having the vessel arrested. Now this is the kind of risk that a shipping company from Geneva would face if they take on such assignments. Insurance companies should be aware, operators should be aware, and importers and owners should be aware. The owner here is Greek. Canada is, there's going to be a merger of two companies, one importing company to Louisiana, United States, with an importing company importing subsidiary in Vancouver in Canada. These two main importers are going to merge in 2 weeks from now. It's going to be the company, one Canadian company importing into the US and Canada, accounting for about 70% perhaps of the total exports from the occupied territories. Now again, the legal risks are considerable. Would there be compensation demands? That would raise, I mean, that would be hundreds of millions of dollars if there would ever be a compensation demand. So there's a legal risk. There's been 2 drilling operations for hydrocarbons in Western Sahara since the occupation began. One offshore and one onshore. On these maps, the map to the left is from 1999. That's the Moroccan government oil company's licenses in Morocco. There's no licenses given in Western Sahara. The Security Council in 2002 ordered its legal counsel for an opinion. Is it allowed for Morocco to issue oil licenses in Western Sahara? What's happened then was that a French and an American company just got the license, each. And the Secretariat of the United Nations says it is not allowed, it's not legal, if the representative of the Sahrawi people has not been given their consent. And without taking this clear conclusion into account, the involved companies proceeded, and they've now been operating since 2001 until today, and the company operating this yellow segment. There was one drilling operation here in 2014-15. That's an American company called Cosmos Energy, partnering with a Scottish company called Cairn. And in the blue to the northwest, there's an Irish-UK company called San Leon. Oops, that was my chair. So these two companies are the only ones to have drilled in Western Sahara under occupation. We are expecting a new drilling offshore by the American-Scottish company later on. They did seismic studies as late as earlier this year. The dark blue segment to the offshore, that's also a Swiss company, that's Glencore. They have announced to Swiss media that they're pulling out. So the ones involved are, and also there's actually a South African link to one of the companies here, but they have an office one place, and that's in Johannesburg. But come back to that later on. This is this is a picture taken in Namibia, by the way, Ambassador. Here's a drill ship on its way to Western Sahara, just built in South Korea. That's the first ever drilling operation in Western Sahara, is heading to Western Sahara. Here we have thousands of refugees protesting against the Irish oil exploration, San Leon go home. One man, Cosmos Energy, do not drill in Western Sahara. The only company to do offshore drilling in front of his house in the occupied territory is cut with razor blades. Now there's no effort to seek the consent of the Sahrawi people by the oil companies. If you go to the websites of Glencore, of Cosmos, all the references to the United Nations are lies. They're false representations of the UN when it comes to how they represent the legality of being there. All aspects of consent are removed, and the only way they explain their presence is by saying, we do this to the benefit of the local populations. It's the way people talked about colonialism. I mean, this is the way Europeans talked about Africa in the 19th century. Let's take over parts of Africa to the local population's benefit. This is several hundred years old way of talking. And this is how Cosmos Energy is talking on its website, totally misrepresenting the United Nations resolutions. The latest offshore surveys done just a few weeks ago, this is from July. This is Chinese, by the way. Chinese, French, and they have supply vessels from all over. One vessel, fisheries vessel, can dump more fish overboard as garbage than all the refugees from Western Sahara receive in 1 year as aid. One refugee gets 1 box of sardines every month. That equals 900 tons a year. That's the protein they get. UN talks about the malnutrition in the camps. Half the population live in refugee camps. They get 1 box of sardine every month. And one fishing vessel, like this one, from Northern Europe, can dump 1,000 tons of garbage. And that's only one vessel. We're talking about a couple of 20 vessels, like this one, private Moroccan managed. Then we have a large fleet of small-scale fishermen, and we have larger fishers agreements with particularly Russia and the European Union. This is most of an ethical question. Fish is exported in 4 ways. It's frozen fish, canned fish, fish oil, and fish meal. And they end up in different markets. The fish oil, the value of the fish oil, omega-3, is about half the entire multilateral aid to the refugee camps. Just the fish oil. It's about 15 million euros. That ends up in France. Canned fish, frozen fish. This photo is from 2 hours ago. It shows a cargo vessel anchoring just next to fishing vessels offshore Dakhla. The canned fish, frozen fish end up in West Africa to a large extent. Countries, many of them sympathetic to Western Sahara. Even going as far down as we've seen exports to all the way down the coast to West Africa. Some ends up in the Middle East, Turkey, Egypt. It ends up a bit everywhere. This is another kind of business. This is also taken an hour ago. This is offshore the capital. This is a Swedish, Norwegian, I'm myself Norwegian. This is a Swedish Norwegian vessel transporting oil into Western Sahara. So here in particular we use the same argumentation as the South African issue from the apartheid era. Where does the energy in Western Sahara come from? So it ends up in terminals onshore, and these are petroleum products from Spain. So Spain is supplying all the oil or oil products needed for the army, for the fishing fleet, for the whole industry, but also for the civilian population. There are 12 plantations. We call this non-renewable agriculture. It's based on fossil water, non-renewable water reserves. There's a big lake under the desert. And this water, very water-intensive agriculture production is exported to Europe, some also to North America, we think, but most of all to Europe. And we can see on the different localizations how the plantations have developed, particularly in as the European Union started its trade talks with Morocco from 2005 onwards. That's when they started to pop up. Some of them are owned by the Moroccan king. The Moroccan king controls around 7% of the gross domestic product in Morocco, the royal family, through its holding branch, SNI. This controls many of the sectors. One of them is wind energy. The Moroccan government gives, there are tenders for wind contracts, and they end up with the Moroccan King's company, because, well, and they partner with Siemens from Germany. So Siemens from Germany and Enel from Italy, 2 companies are involved in energy infrastructure. How can you be against, this is a problem for the Sahrawis. Morocco is best in class in renewable energy, but they keep building it in the occupied territories. They're cementing the occupation through windmills and solar plants. And you have ethical investors, ethical banks. Oh, we need to invest in green energy. Let's put it in occupied Western Sahara. So we have a problem in communicating the problematic aspects of the green grabbing. 95% of the energy needed for this phosphate mine is from Siemens windmills. And then finally, of course, we have the beaches on the Canary Islands. They're all fake. And Madeira, so Portugal, Spain, the beaches on both Madeira, Azores, Canary Islands, building industry, construction industry, hotels, roads are from Western Sahara. So this is also a topic that we're following quite closely. There are many good, you find all of this I mentioned on our very messy old website. Good luck maneuvering it. There are good stories. We have companies pulling out, understanding that they did a mistake. They thought they were operating in Morocco. We actually have companies thinking they operate in Morocco. We have shipping companies with vessels all over the world, and they didn't really understand this until it happened, and they say, sorry, we didn't mean to do this, we'll never do it again. We have public pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, private banks, private pension funds, actively taking a stance, and I know several of your governments with wealth funds, they have invested money in all these companies I've just mentioned. So this is a matter of ethical management of the sovereign wealth funds. So things are happening on the business side, and companies are departing, but still we see, particularly on the fish trade, we see many governments, or many companies involved in many governments. Well, that was what I wanted to say, really. I can speak for weeks, but thank you.